My first experience with the paranormal happened when I was 5 or 6 years old and living in Florida with my family. I am 48 years old now, and this one experience is so etched in my memory that when I recall it today, it is still as clear as if it had happened to me a few moments ago. We lived on a cattle ranch not far from Bushnell, Florida. At that time, in the 60s, there were no street lights on the ranch, just a gravel road across cattle grates to our small, isolated ranch house in the pasture. I remember going to the screened-in back door that night and seeing my mother standing in the square of light cast from our kitchen through the door and onto the yard. She was raking out scraps for our dogs into their dog pan. She saw I was at the door and asked me to bring the flashlight that always sat on our kitchen counter. I took the flashlight to her without even a question in my mind. She cast a beam of the light down into the dark pasture where I could see two orange eyes faintly glowing. In the dark, "What is it, Mama?" I remember asking, and she replied that she had been watching the eyes for a little while. She thought it might be a cow at first, but the eyes were too close to the ground. We watched as the eyes started down the pasture toward some large trees that grew at the side of our house. The eyes didn't move like cow eyes, in a slow, plodding way, but smoothly, more like a bird in my mind. They remained close to the ground and always watching us with their orange glow. It glided smoothly to a huge live oak tree that grew maybe 25 feet from our house. Then the eyes did the strangest thing. They turned parallel to the tree's trunk and glided up the side of the tree for about 15 feet, disappeared around the back of the huge trunk, and then out onto the first branch that grew on the opposite side of the tree. I remember my mama saying, "That's no cow," softly as she traced a flashlight beam along the limb underneath the eyes. The beam caught no sign of fur or feet of any kind, just empty blackness. Like the night, the eyes disappeared into a large clump of leaves at the end of the branch. My mama and I ran through the back door, through the house, and out onto our front porch. My daddy was sitting on the couch with the younger children, watching a comedy on television. I remember it must have been a comedy because I remember laughter from the audience or a soundtrack. Daddy said, "What is it?" My mama and I said almost at the same time, "There's something in the pasture." Before we ran out onto the porch, we stood in the light cast from the front door and watched the end of the tree branch bouncing up and down wildly in the flashlight beam. Daddy was trying to corral the younger children back from the door. I remember turning around to see what he was doing, and when I turned back, the moon started to rise over the flat Florida landscape, casting a bluish glow. Now we could see without aid from the flashlight. The branch bounced up and down. I remember the rustle of leaves, and a curious smell came to me on the night air like burning wood. The branch stopped bouncing because the owner of the eyes had jumped out of the tree and onto the gravel road in front of our house. For a moment, it was obscured by the hanging, still slightly bouncing clump of leaves, and then it started to move down the road in front of our house. The moon showed the owner of the orange glowing eyes, glowing more brightly now in the moonlight. It was no cow, for whatever was stood on two spindly legs like animal legs that ended in two thin narrow hooves. From the legs upward was a huge body with no discernible arms and a hump of a head with two very long straight horns that curved slightly upward at the ends. The entire body was pitch black and at least 6 feet tall from hoof to horn end, the only color being the bright orange eyes. This thing hopped on its two legs down the road. I could hear the shifting crunch of gravel and see blue sparks fly up as its feet came back down on the road. My mama and I, accompanied by my daddy, piled into the house and slammed the door. We were breathing as if we'd run a race. My daddy, from his position with his back against the door, said breathlessly, "That's a platt-eye. There's treasure buried near that tree." I didn't understand then, but years later, I discovered exactly what a platt-eye is. In Southern legend, platt-eyes are the ghosts of murdered animals that are set to guard hidden treasure by a living human. Daddy never dug around the tree to see if there was hidden treasure, believing whatever treasure there might have been was cursed. This singular incident from my young life set me on the road to being a true believer in the flip side of the coin from our reality. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that things exist in our world which are almost beyond reason to explain. As I told Road 68, I was having a bad feeling before going to sleep last night after reading one of her stories. I made sure I calmed myself down before trying to go to sleep. I knew my mind would play tricks on me, thinking I might have seen something go by my bed or something like that. But what happened was no stretch of my imagination. I even had to bring my dog in, as I know she has seen things before. But I will go ahead and tell you that she was no use other than just taking up space on my bed. So I find myself starting to calm down, and I decide to turn off my television and try to get some sleep. I'm laying there for about 15 minutes or so when I hear the strange thud. It happened at 4:50 a.m. I know because I immediately looked at my clock and decided to take note of this occurrence. My heart started pounding a little, and this very strange feeling comes over my body. It feels like every inch of my bones are being pushed outward from inside me. I assumed something must have fallen, or there was an equally good explanation. I disregarded the sound, and even the strange feeling I had, and tried to go back to sleep. It sounded as if it came from the garage, which is about 15 yards away from my room. I have lived in this house for almost 8 years coming this October, and I have never heard a noise like this. I am very familiar with the noises my house makes. I wouldn't even be telling you all this if it was the only occurrence, of course, as it could be easily disregarded as a normal noise and just my imagination getting the best of me. But just as I got done telling this Mickey guy to be careful what he asked for, I ignored my very own advice. Thinking I was brave enough, I began to ask, in my head, not aloud, if this is some kind of spirit, please make that noise again, so that I know it wasn't a random occurrence. I also began to pray, God, if this is a spirit, please don't let it enter my room, harm, touch, or manifest itself in my presence. Before I could even finish the last word of my prayer, the loud thud happens once more. I literally started shaking uncontrollably and began praying again. It came at about 4:54 a.m. This is the first time since I have moved in this house that I prayed for the ghost blanket. I could still feel the presence of something as I prayed. I began feeling cold gusts of wind. And yes, my fan is always on, but this wasn't just a gust from the fan, it was very different. It was also accompanied by extremely hot flashes. I almost broke out in a sweat. I began to take off my shirt, and not just because of the hot flashes. I have a cross tattoo on my back, and I thought it would hinder off any bad spirits. I made sure it was visible and then began to calm down a little. I knew I shouldn't have asked for such a thing if I was not ready to hear this spirit communicate, and I immediately regretted my decision. I hear my dog kind of whimper, but this was in the back of my mind because I am still feeling very uneasy at the moment. My eyes stayed open until sunrise, and if that wasn't enough, as I am laying there still very afraid, I hear something in my head. I don't know if any of you have ever been spoken to by a higher power, but every time I have heard a voice, it seems to come from inside my head. And the voice, in a loud whisper, says, "You have been chosen." I freak. I immediately begin to ask over and over again, chosen for what? Chosen for what? And then I hear, "You will see." This occurred at 5:15 a.m. I don't know what this means, and I am scared to find out. Has anyone ever had this kind of thing happen to them? I am still very scared, and I'm not sure what to do about this right now. I don't know if I can handle being a medium or anything like that. Is there any way to get over this fear of spirits? I don't even think that's what it meant, but I am still very scared of what it could mean. I guess I will find out in my own time, but if any of you have some help to offer, please tell me anything and everything you can, preferably from personal experiences or from something you have heard similar to this. All opinions are welcome, though. I hope I didn't bring these things into my house. On the lighter side, I was able to fall asleep shortly after the sun came up, and I didn't have any bad dreams. I don't exactly remember any of them, but I know they weren't anything disturbing. I'm in this band, and we thought that it was about time to take some band photos. So, we go up to my driveway and we're standing under this large streetlight hanging over the top part of my driveway. I set up the camera on the tripod, and we were going to stand at this fence we have up there surrounding our junkyard, which was down like a small cliff, maybe about 10 feet down. Well, we have our junkyard there, and down below it is a valley which is full of woods and stuff. We have this path that runs through it. Heather, our singer, said she was seeing something in the path down there. It was dark out. By the way, then our lead guitarist, Sean, said, "You see it too?" I thought it was just a street light off in the distance. So I walk over and look at it, and it looked like someone was standing in the path with a lantern, but it kept going off and coming back on. Then it slowly started to move. So we watched it, and Sean and I take Heather to the house and tell her to stay. There, we grab flashlights and knives, because we didn't know if it was someone out there who was crazy or something. We go out into the path. We start walking, and it's starting to come up a storm. We're standing there, surrounded by the woods, and in the silence, I call out, "Hello." As soon as I finished saying this, lightning filled the sky. Sean joked and said he had seen too many horror movies to know that this was a stupid idea. So we continued on down the path throughout the woods, and we ended up where we had seen this lantern type thing earlier, but it was gone. That's when we heard heavy footsteps running through the woods. We followed them out of the trail, but we didn't find anything. Down near the bottom of this large hill I live on is this old trailer deep in the woods no one has lived in for years. So we thought if anything was out there, it probably made a run for that trailer. So we went out that way and crossed over the barbed wire fence. We were about to head towards the trailer, but then we saw the lantern-shaped thing again, and it was moving. We followed it for a little, but it went away again. So we stopped. I turned back to look at Sean. He was looking down at the ground and said he thought he heard something hit the ground beside him. So we both look up. Through a few trees, we see the floating orange ball of light that looked like it was inside a lantern floating there, 5 feet away from us. Now, my grandfather works for the mines, so I had a high-powered mining light, and I shined it over there, but there was nothing holding it up. It was just this orange glowing light hovering in the air. It got brighter, and then faded out once more only to reappear farther away from us. There was no way something could have run from us as far as this thing got without making a sound. We wanted to keep chasing it, but we were coming upon a part of the woods where we had seen a lot of snakes in the past, so we decided to just get out of there. So we walked back up to the spot where we were taking pictures to see if we could see it from up there again, but we couldn't. It was then when we noticed it hovering over my backyard. It faded out again, and then quickly shot back off down the hill. It was very exciting coming so close to this ball of light that looked like it was in a lantern. And I found out they used to mine for coal under my junkyard, and there were a fair number of deaths down there. So I'm wondering if that had anything to do with it. I hope you enjoyed my story. When I was about 12 years old, my biggest accomplishment at that time was to be alone at home by myself. My brother was staying at a friend's house, and my parents went to dinner with their friends. I was never scared of staying home alone. I enjoyed it a lot. I have a very vivid imagination, but this was something completely different. There were no outside influences to scare me, and I was just watching something normal on TV. Our old house was a split level. We had a wall on the north side of the den that had the entertainment center, and on the left of it were the stairs that lead to the basement, and then left of that were the stairs that went to the second floor. Our couch, which I was sitting on at the time, was against the wall on the east side of the den close to the stairs. As I was sitting on the couch, watching this show, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. It was at the very top of the stairs in the unlit hallway. I literally just felt a chill down my spine while writing. That is, I turned my head to see this very tall, dark man standing at the top of my stairs looking down at me. I say man because it didn't have any hair, and I believed it to be an actual person at the time. I couldn't even make a sound or anything. I jumped up from the couch and ran towards the kitchen. We had this bar-type counter that came out of the wall on the southwest corner of the den that separates it from the kitchen. I grabbed the phone and ducked down behind it. I immediately called my dad. At the time, I thought it was a burglar in my house that was going to kill me. My dad could tell how scared I really was, and he rushed home immediately. That was the longest 10 to 15 minutes of my life. It felt like I was waiting for hours, thinking at any time this man was about to come around the corner and kill me. As soon as my dad got there, he checked the entire house. He couldn't find anyone and thought I made up the whole story. I couldn't sleep by myself for a few months after that because he was standing right outside my bedroom. I thought it was some type of evil spirit out to get me. I didn't ever see it again, but I always felt something watching me while I was trying to sleep. I used to pray every night for God to put a ghost blanket over me so that nothing could touch or harm me while I was trying to fall asleep, and also while I was sleeping. I know it sounds weird, but it gave me comfort as a child so that I could fall asleep without fear of something trying to get me. We moved out of that house a year later, and I never had those types of feelings again. It wasn't until then that I realized it wasn't just some childhood fear of ghosts, but that you can actually feel the presence of spirits or ghosts. It churns my stomach every time I think about it. I'm not sure if it was an evil spirit or just one that liked to watch over me, but it certainly scared me. If I had to give an accurate description of the man, I'd say he was about a 6-foot-tall black figure with dark baggy clothes, little or no hair on his head, and I couldn't see any other facial features. It was almost like a shadow or something. And I could feel his eyes, but I couldn't see them, if that makes any sense. I'd love to hear your comments or suggestions about what happened. Thank you so much. Hi, my name is Ashley, and I currently live in Birmingham, Alabama. There is an old steel mill located down called Sloss Furnace. It's haunted. I visited Sloss twice with 2 of my friends. The first time we went, it was very interesting to see how things worked in the 1800s. The factory was built in 1882 and was closed because of pollution, and the cost of steel went down in 1971. We took photos and walked around twice, but one of the rooms, called the blowing engine room, had some kind of attraction to it. Story has it that this is where the majority of the men worked, and also where most of their worst deaths occurred. We heard banging noises and footsteps. I took a photo where one of my friends was standing by an old wheel, where one of the men supposedly got snagged by the wheel, which was moving very fast and was crushed, and about every few seconds there would be less of his body. I was scared to death. The picture was perfect. I wasn't moving, he wasn't either, but when we examined the photo, his body was see-through and his head was gone. We were a bit scared that night when we went home. My second visit was with one of my same friends, but I brought along my best friend this time. He was very skeptical about going to Sloss because his exact words were, "Respect the things of the past." But he ended up going with us anyway. This time was kind of unusual because the museum schedule stated that it was open Tuesday through Friday 10 to 4 p.m. But we went on a Monday and no one told us that we had to leave. So as soon as we got beside the old machines outside, both of my friends felt like we were being watched. I said that they were just a little uneasy about the visit. I really wasn't bothered because I knew what to expect. We were by the biggest furnace there was, and we were reading about the different machines and how they worked, and all of a sudden I spotted a white shadowy figure peeking from behind a pole, and as soon as I turned my head, it was gone. After that, we went into the tunnel, and my best friend stated that he saw a dark shadowy figure standing next to my other friend. He didn't tell us this until we left. We went inside the blowing engine room, which is supposedly the most haunted in the factory, and began to walk around. I can say as soon as you get inside the room, you feel very lightheaded, nauseated, weak, and full of fear. I was telling the different stories from which I heard about the people who died in that room. As we began to stroll around the room, we stopped, and out of nowhere we heard something go, S-H-H-H-H-H-H-H. When I say we ran like we've never ran before, I dropped my watch and I went back to get it. I guess I wasn't that afraid enough to the point where I could go back and get my watch. But that was a very interesting encounter. I will definitely go back, but not alone. Why did we experience paranormal activity on our second visit? and not on our first? Was it because my best friend was with us this time and so full of fear? Because ghosts know when you're afraid, and they feed off of fear.